A polished marble floor reflects two figures, a universe of difference between them. One is a man in a faded gray uniform, his hands calloused from work, his posture slightly stooped by the weight of the world. The other is a little girl, strapped into a wheelchair that costs more than his car, her limbs unresponsive but her eyes deep pools of sapphire blue, holding a longing that could break your heart. He is a janitor, a single father just trying to survive. She is an heiress, trapped in a silent, gilded cage. What happens next is a dance, a simple, stolen moment of grace that will shatter two families and rebuild them into something beautiful. But they don't know that the girl's billionaire mother, a woman forged in grief and steel, is watching every single move. Leo Martinez considered himself a connoisseur of silence. In his 5 years as a cleaner for an elite agency, he'd learned that every building had its own unique brand of quiet. There was the tense, humming silence of corporate offices after hours, thick with the ghosts of deadlines and ambition. There was the hollow silence of empty schools on a weekend, echoing with the phantom laughter of children. But the silence at the Vanderbilt estate was different. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that absorbed sound rather than reflected it. It was the silence of immense wealth, of halls so vast that footsteps disappeared, of rooms so meticulously decorated they felt more like museum exhibits than living spaces. Leo's worn rubber-soled shoes were an offense to the Italian marble floors. His squeaking utility cart, a vulgar interruption of the peace. He was grateful for the job, of course. The pay was nearly double what he'd made at his last post, and with his 7-year-old daughter Maya to care for, every dollar was a soldier in his quiet war against debt and insecurity. Maya was his sun, his moon, and all his stars, a whirlwind of bright laughter, messy pigtails, and endless questions. Their tiny apartment was filled with her crayon drawings, the scent of her favorite cinnamon toast, and the sound of her animated chatter. It was loud, chaotic, and overflowing with love. It was everything the Vanderbilt estate was not. Leo had been working here for 3 weeks and had yet to meet the owner, Mrs. Catherine Vanderbilt. He knew of her, of course. Everyone in the city knew of her. She was the formidable CEO of Vanderbilt Innovations, a tech empire she had inherited and then tripled in value after her husband, Richard Vanderbilt, died in a helicopter crash 3 years prior. The tabloids painted her as an ice queen, a brilliant but remote figure who buried her grief in board meetings and stock portfolios. His direct supervisor was the head of household, Mrs. Gable, a woman with a spine made of iron and a stare that could curdle milk. She had made the rules brutally clear on his first day. "You are here to be invisible, Mr. Martinez. You will see nothing. You will hear nothing. You will say nothing. You will perform your duties to the letter and disappear. The family's privacy is paramount. Is that understood?" Leo had nodded, his gaze respectfully lowered. "Perfectly, ma'am." He had, however, seen the other resident of the mansion, Catherine Vanderbilt's daughter Lily. He'd only caught glimpses of the girl, who looked to be about Maya's age. She was always in a highly advanced motorized wheelchair, accompanied by a rotating cast of nurses and therapists. Her body was frail, her limbs locked in the rigid posture characteristic of severe cerebral palsy. But her eyes were stunningly alert, a vibrant, intelligent blue that seemed to take in everything. Leo, a man whose heart had been softened to mush by his own daughter, felt a profound ache every time he saw her. He saw the loneliness that clung to her, like the fine cashmere blankets they wrapped her in. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Leo was tasked with cleaning the West Wing, a section of the house he usually didn't cover. Mrs. Gable explained that the regular cleaner was ill. "You'll be cleaning the solarium and the adjacent therapy suite. Miss Lily's physical therapy session ends at 3 p.m. Be finished and gone by 2:50 p.m. Do not engage, do not linger." As he mopped the long, sun-drenched corridor leading to the therapy suite, he heard it, faintly at first, then growing clearer. It was music. Not the sterile classical music that sometimes whispered from hidden speakers in the main hall, but something richer, more passionate. It was a piano piece, a waltz that was both melancholic and hopeful. It stirred something deep inside him, a memory of a different life, a life with his wife, Elena. They had loved to dance, spinning around their tiny living room to whatever music was on the radio, laughing until their sides hurt. The music was a ghost, and for a moment, the heavy silence of the mansion was filled with a phantom joy. He reached the therapy suite, a large bright room with padded floors, parallel bars, and various pieces of specialized equipment. Through the large glass pane in the door, he saw the girl, Lily. She was strapped onto a tilt table, her body held upright by a series of supports. A man in scrubs, presumably her therapist, was gently stretching her arm. Lily's face was turned away from the man, towards the massive window overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. The beautiful waltz was playing from a small speaker in the corner, and on her face, in those impossibly blue eyes, Leo saw a tear tracing a silent path down her cheek. She wasn't crying in pain. It was something else. It was a deep, resonant sadness, the look of someone who felt the beauty of the music in her soul, but was trapped in a body that could not respond. Leo's heart cracked. He forgot Mrs. Gable's warning. He forgot he was supposed to be invisible. In that moment, he wasn't a janitor. He was just a father, looking at a child in pain. He stopped his cart, his hand resting on the handle of his mop, and just watched, the sad, beautiful music washing over them both. Unseen, 2 floors above in her home office, Catherine Vanderbilt paused a video conference with her board in Tokyo. On one of her many monitors, a live feed from the West Wing security camera showed a janitor, a man she didn't recognize, standing motionless outside her daughter's therapy room. He was staring. Her eyes narrowed. Her hand instinctively moved to the intercom button connecting her to Mrs. Gable. Protection of her daughter was a primal, all-consuming instinct. Who was this man, and why was he breaking protocol? Catherine held her finger over the intercom button, a flicker of cold anger rising within her. Every person who worked in this house underwent a background check so thorough it would make a spy blush. They were vetted, screened, and warned into a state of professional invisibility. This man's blatant staring was a violation, a crack in the fortress she had so carefully constructed around her daughter. She zoomed the camera in. He wasn't looking at Lily with malice or even idle curiosity. There was a strange softness to his expression, a profound aching sadness that mirrored the one she so often saw in Lily's eyes. It disarmed her. She watched as he slowly shook his head, as if clearing a painful memory, and then deliberately turned his back to the door and began meticulously polishing the floor. His movements timed perfectly to the rhythm of the waltz. It was odd, intrusive, yet respectful. She let her finger fall away from the button, deciding to observe for now. The merger with Akihiro Tech could wait another minute. Downstairs, Leo tried to focus on his work, the scent of lemon polish filling the air, but the music seeped into his bones. It was Chopin. Elena had loved Chopin. He could almost feel her hand in his, her head on his shoulder. Grief was a funny thing. It was a dull, constant ache most days, but sometimes a sound or a smell would make it sharp and new all over again. He finished the hallway and glanced at his watch. 2:45 p.m., 5 minutes before his mandated disappearance. As he packed up his cart, the door to the therapy suite opened. The therapist, a kind-faced man named Dr. Thorne, nodded at him. "All done for the day," he said, more to himself than to Leo. He turned back to Lily, who was now back in her wheelchair. "All right, superstar, let's get you to your room. Nurse Amelia will be up in a minute." As Dr. Thorne began to unhook a monitor from Lily's chair, his pager went off with an urgent beep, beep, beep. He glanced at it, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Blast, it's the director. I have to take this. I'll be right back, Lilypad. Don't go running off, you hear?" he said with a gentle, practiced cheerfulness. He gave her a wink and stepped out into the hall, his voice dropping to a professional murmur as he answered the call. Leo was frozen. He should leave. His time was up. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at him to push his cart down the hall and vanish, but he couldn't. He looked through the open door at the little girl alone in the room. The Chopin waltz had just ended, and a new piece began to play. This one was slower, more intimate, a simple, heartbreakingly beautiful melody. Lily's small hand, which usually lay curled on her lap, twitched. Her fingers unfurled, just for a second, as if reaching for the notes in the air. Her eyes were closed, and her head was tilted back. She was lost in the music. Leo thought of Maya. When Maya was sad, he'd scoop her up, tickle her, and make silly faces until she giggled. He would hold her tight and tell her everything would be okay. This girl, Lily, had none of that. She had a fortress of a home, the best medical care money could buy, but in that moment, she looked like the loneliest person on earth. An impulse, crazy and reckless, seized him. He parked his cart quietly against the wall. He wiped his palms on his trousers, took a deep breath, and stepped over the threshold into the therapy room. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of antiseptic. Lily's eyes snapped open, wide with surprise. They locked onto his. He expected fear, or at the very least confusion. But there was none. There was only a deep, startling curiosity. He gave her a small, gentle smile. He didn't speak. Words felt too loud for this sacred space. He pointed to his own chest. "Leo," he whispered, his voice raspy. He then pointed a finger to the air, twirling it as if tracing the path of the melody. He looked at her, his expression a silent question. "Do you feel that too?" Her eyes, impossibly blue, held his gaze. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod was her reply. Upstairs, Catherine leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her mahogany desk. "What is he doing?" she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was in the room. He was off the camera's main angle, but she could see his back. He was approaching her daughter. Her blood ran cold. She snatched the phone to call security, but then she saw Lily's face on the monitor. The tension that always seemed to grip her small features had eased. The perpetual frown of discomfort was gone. In its place was an expression of pure, unadulterated wonder. Catherine's hand froze over the phone. Leo took another step closer. The music swelled, a cascade of soaring, romantic notes. He remembered dancing with Elena at their wedding. They couldn't afford a band, just a small stereo playing a mixed CD. It was the happiest day of his life. He looked at Lily, not at her chair or her twisted limbs, but into her eyes. He saw the vibrant spirit trapped inside. "Nobody," he said, his voice barely audible, "should listen to music this beautiful all by themselves." He didn't wait for a reply. He walked behind her high-tech wheelchair, his calloused hands finding the smooth, ergonomic grips. He hesitated for only a fraction of a second. This was insane. He was going to be fired, maybe even arrested. But then he looked at Lily's reflection in the gleaming window. A small, hopeful smile was blooming on her face. It was all the permission he needed. With a gentle push, he began to move. The first movement was tentative, a slow, gliding arc across the padded floor. Leo was clumsy at first, unused to the weight and balance of the advanced wheelchair. But his instincts, honed by years of dancing with Elena, took over. He wasn't just pushing a piece of medical equipment, he was leading a partner. He began to hum along with the melody, a low, soft baritone that didn't compete with the piano, but supported it. He moved in time with the music, a simple box step translated into the rolling motion of the chair. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A gentle push forward, a smooth turn to the side, a graceful glide back. Lily let out a sound. It wasn't a word, but a soft, breathy gasp of sheer delight. It was the most beautiful sound Leo had ever heard in this house of crushing silence. He glanced down at her. Her head was tilted up towards him, that miraculous smile spreading across her face, lighting up her features like the dawn. Her body was still captive, but her spirit, for the first time he had ever seen, was flying. "There you go," Leo murmured, his own smile now broad and genuine. "That's it. Just feel the music." He became bolder, spinning the chair in a slow, sweeping circle as the piano piece reached its crescendo. For a magical 90 seconds, the sterile therapy suite transformed. It was a grand ballroom. He was not a janitor in a faded uniform. He was a prince. She was not a disabled girl trapped in a chair. She was a princess, the belle of the ball, her eyes sparkling brighter than any diamond chandelier. The rain-streaked windows became a backdrop of 1,000 twinkling city lights. They were just two people, lost in a moment of pure, unscripted joy. He dipped the chair back in a playful flourish as the final notes of the song hung in the air, then brought it gently to a stop in the center of the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the chair's motor and their shared, quiet breathing. Lily's smile was gone, replaced by an expression of profound peace. She looked at him, and her eyes said everything her voice could not. "Thank you." The spell was broken by the sound of footsteps in the hall. Dr. Thorne was coming back. Panic seized Leo. He quickly maneuvered the chair back to its original position and backed away, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He slipped out of the room just as the therapist re-entered. "Sorry about that, Lilypad," Dr. Thorne said, his attention on his pager. "Now, where were we?" He paused, looking at Lily. "You look different. Your cheeks are flushed. Are you feeling all right?" Lily just gave him that serene, secret smile. Leo grabbed his cart and practically fled down the corridor, his mind a chaotic jumble of euphoria and terror. He had just committed a monumental breach of conduct. He had touched the untouchable daughter. He would be fired by morning. He'd have to explain to Maya why he couldn't buy her the art set she wanted for her birthday. A wave of regret washed over him. It was a stupid, sentimental risk. But then he remembered the look on Lily's face, the light in her eyes, the sound of her happy gasp. No, he thought, his pace slowing. It wasn't stupid. It was worth it. Whatever the consequences, for 90 seconds, he had helped a little girl dance. 2 floors up, Catherine Vanderbilt sat rigidly in her leather chair, her hands clenched into fists on her desk. The phone to security remained untouched. The feed on her monitor showed the empty hallway. The janitor was gone. She couldn't process what she had just witnessed. Her body was a war zone of conflicting emotions. Part of her, the ruthless CEO and fiercely protective mother, was outraged. The sheer audacity of a cleaner laying his hands on her daughter, on her property, was unthinkable. He had crossed a line that was not to be crossed. But another part of her, a part she had long thought dead and buried with her husband Richard, was stirring. It was the part that remembered what joy looked like. She hadn't seen Lily smile like that, a true, uninhibited, soul-deep smile, since before Richard's death. The grief of the accident had settled over their home like a permanent shroud, and Lily, sensitive and intuitive, had retreated even further into her silent world. Catherine had thrown millions at the problem, the best doctors, the most advanced therapies, cutting-edge technology. Nothing had produced a reaction like the one she'd just seen. A janitor with kind eyes and a soft voice, humming to a Chopin waltz, had accomplished in 90 seconds what her entire fortune could not. The outrage was still there, but it was now tangled with a bewildering and deeply uncomfortable cocktail of jealousy, confusion, and a tiny, terrifying spark of hope. She finally picked up the phone, but she didn't call security. She called her head of household. "Mrs. Gable," she said, her voice dangerously calm and steady. "The new janitor, Martinez. I want a full-spectrum security and background check run on him, not the standard agency one. I want the best private investigator you can find. I want to know everything about him. I want to know where he was born, what he eats for breakfast, and every secret he has ever kept. I want it on my desk by Friday. And Mrs. Gable," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper, "under no circumstances is he to be fired. Not yet." For the next 2 days, Leo Martinez worked in a state of quiet dread. Every footstep in the hall made him jump. Every glance from Mrs. Gable felt like an accusation. He expected to be called into her office at any moment, to be summarily dismissed and escorted off the property. He cleaned with a frantic, obsessive precision, hoping his exemplary work might somehow atone for his transgression. He avoided the West Wing entirely, sticking to his designated route like a man walking a tightrope. The worst part was the silence that followed. He didn't see Lily again. He didn't hear the music from the therapy suite. It was as if the moment had never happened, a dream that had vanished with the morning light. The thought that he might have gotten her therapist in trouble, or worse, caused her privileges to be revoked, gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Catherine Vanderbilt was conducting a two-front war. In the boardroom, she was a predator, ruthlessly negotiating the final details of the Akihiro Tech merger. Her lieutenants saw their CEO at her sharpest, a brilliant strategist who could spot a weakness in a contract from a mile away. But in the solitude of her home office, she was something else entirely. She was an obsessive analyst, poring over the data that was trickling in from the private investigator, a man named Mr. Finch who specialized in discreet inquiries for the ultra-wealthy. The preliminary report landed on her desk Thursday morning. It was a thick, spiral-bound document with a plain black cover. Subject: Leonardo Leo Martinez. Age: 38. Status: widowed, dependent. Maya Martinez, age 7. Catherine felt a small, unexpected jolt at the word widowed. She read on. The report detailed a life of quiet decency. Born in a working-class neighborhood. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. A handful of creditors, but all payments were current, if sometimes late. He had worked as a carpenter for 15 years, running a small but respected business out of a rented workshop. Character references from former clients described him as meticulous, honest, and an artist with wood. Then came the turning point. 4 years ago, an electrical fire had destroyed his workshop. The report included scorched, black and white photos of the wreckage. He was uninsured. A lapse in payment meant his policy had expired the week before the blaze. He had lost everything. The next page contained a hospital report. His wife, Elena Martinez, had been in the workshop helping him pack up late that night. She had suffered severe smoke inhalation. While she survived the initial event, her lungs were permanently damaged. A year later, she succumbed to a sudden, aggressive bout of pneumonia that her compromised system couldn't fight. The cause of death was listed as respiratory failure, but anyone reading the story could see the true cause was the fire. Catherine put the report down, her hand trembling slightly. She stared out the window at the perfectly manicured gardens, but she didn't see them. She saw a man whose world had been burned to the ground, a man who had lost his livelihood and his wife in one fell swoop, a man left to raise a young daughter on his own. She understood his kind of grief. It was a mirror of her own. Richard's death had been sudden, a violent tearing in the fabric of her reality. This man, Leo, had endured a slower, more agonizing version of the same fate. The final piece of information arrived Friday morning in a separate, encrypted email from Mr. Finch. Subject: Follow-up on Martinez workshop fire. Madam Vanderbilt, per your request for a deep dive, my arson investigator reviewed the city's official report. The cause was determined to be a faulty surge protector. I cross-referenced the model number. The unit was a PowerGuard Pro Series 7. It was manufactured by Omni Electrics, a subsidiary of a larger tech firm called Cybernetic Solutions. As you know, Vanderbilt Innovations acquired Cybernetic Solutions 2.5 years ago. Catherine felt the air leave her lungs. The world tilted on its axis. She reread the email, then read it again. The chain of causality was undeniable, if distant. A faulty product, made by a company that was now hers, had set in motion the series of events that had destroyed Leo Martinez's life. He was working as a janitor in her house because of a corporate oversight that ultimately fell under her purview. The irony was so thick, so cruel, it was almost poetic. Her carefully constructed world of control and order felt like a sham. She had seen this man as a potential threat, a grifter, a nobody. But the truth was, they were connected by a thread of tragedy, and she, unknowingly, held the scissors. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done in years. She canceled her remaining meetings. She walked out of her office, down the grand staircase, and through the echoing halls of her own home. She found Leo in the grand library, carefully dusting the spines of leather-bound books that no one ever read. He saw her and immediately stiffened, his face paling. He set down his feather duster, his hands clasped in front of him, like a defendant awaiting his sentence. "Mr. Martinez," she said. Her voice was softer than she intended. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. About the other day, with your daughter. I am so sorry it was out of line. I wasn't thinking. It will never happen again. Please, don't fire me. I need this job." Catherine looked at this man, at the worry etched into the lines on his face, at his worn-out uniform, and she felt a wave of shame so profound it almost buckled her knees. She had been about to reprimand him, but now, knowing what she knew, the words died in her throat. "The waltz you were humming," she said instead, the question taking them both by surprise. "What was it?" Leo blinked, confused by the abrupt change of subject. Chopin, he stammered. Waltz in C-sharp minor. My, my wife, Elena, she loved it. Catherine nodded slowly. Richard, my husband, he used to play it. On the piano in the music room. She hadn't been in that room since he died. The lid of the grand piano was closed, coated in a fine layer of dust that even the most diligent cleaners were forbidden to touch. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They were not a CEO and a janitor. They were a widow and a widower, standing in a silent library, connected by a shared melody of loss. Tell me about your daughter Maya, Catherine said, her voice quiet but firm. Leo, bewildered but sensing the danger had passed, began to speak. He told her about Maya's love for painting, about her goofy laugh, about the way she snorted when she ate spaghetti too fast. As he spoke, the fear drained from his face, replaced by a pure, fatherly love that was so radiant it seemed to warm the cavernous, cold room. Catherine listened, and for the first time in 3 years, she truly heard something other than the ringing silence of her own grief. She heard the sound of a life that had been shattered but not broken, a life that, against all odds, was still filled with love and laughter. It was a sound she desperately wanted back in her own home. The conversation in the library shifted something fundamental within Catherine. The rigid black and white world she inhabited, of assets and liabilities, threats and securities, was suddenly flooded with shades of gray. Leo Martinez was no longer a variable to be managed. He was a man, a father, a fellow traveler in the barren landscape of grief. The knowledge of her company's tangential role in his tragedy sat like a lead weight in her stomach. Her behavior began to change in subtle but significant ways. The next day, she instructed Mrs. Gable to ensure that music, specifically Chopin, was played in the West Wing every afternoon during Lily's therapy sessions. She started watching the security feeds, not with suspicion, but with a kind of clinical, hopeful curiosity. Leo, emboldened by their strange conversation and relieved to still have a job, fell back into a cautious routine. One afternoon, while cleaning near the therapy suite, he heard the familiar notes of the C-sharp minor waltz. He peeked through the glass. Lily was in her chair, a therapist gently working on her leg. But Lily's eyes were on the door, watching, waiting. When her eyes met his, a small but unmistakable smile touched her lips. Leo smiled back, a warm, genuine smile, and gave a tiny conspiratorial wave before moving on. Upstairs, Catherine watched the simple, silent exchange on her monitor, a janitor and her daughter sharing a secret. A month ago, it would have sent her into a rage. Now it brought a complex ache to her chest. It was a connection, a real one, forged without money or influence. It was something she had failed to create herself. Her world began to unravel further that weekend. She had a rare Saturday free and was determined to spend quality time with Lily. This meant sitting with her in the solarium while a nurse monitored Lily's vitals, and Catherine tried to read her a storybook. The story was about a princess who could talk to animals. Lily was completely disengaged, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Frustrated, Catherine put the book down. Lily, darling, what is it? What's wrong? Lily remained silent, her expression unchanging. Is it the book? We can read another. Do you want the one about the pony? Catherine's voice was strained, the manufactured cheerfulness wearing thin. Nurse Amelia, a kind woman in her 50s, intervened gently. Mrs. Vanderbilt, sometimes she just has quiet days. There are too many quiet days, Catherine snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. She took a deep breath. She felt like a failure. She could command a boardroom of 100 people, but she couldn't connect with her own child. She thought of Leo. She thought of the way he spoke about his daughter Maya with such easy affection. She thought of the simple, unforced smile he had elicited from Lily. What did he have that she didn't? The answer was painfully simple. He wasn't trying to fix a problem. He was just sharing a moment. The following Monday, Catherine made a decision that sent shockwaves through the household staff. She intercepted Leo as he was beginning his shift. Mr. Martinez, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike, a shield for the uncertainty she felt. I have a proposition for you. Leo braced himself. Yes, ma'am? My daughter, she responded to you, to the music. I would like to hire you for a different role, on a trial basis. Leo's brow furrowed in confusion. A different role? I want you to spend 1 hour a day with Lily, from 3 to 4 p.m. after her physical therapy. You will be a companion. The word felt foreign and inadequate on her tongue. You will play music. You can talk to her. Do whatever it was you did the other day. Your regular duties will be adjusted accordingly, and your salary will be doubled for the duration of the trial. Leo was speechless. He stared at the powerful woman before him, the immaculate designer suit, the perfectly coiffed hair, the air of absolute authority. She was asking him, the janitor, to be a friend to her daughter, and she was talking about it like a business transaction. Mrs. Vanderbilt, he began, choosing his words carefully. I appreciate the offer, truly, but I'm not a therapist. I'm just a cleaner. I don't have any qualifications. You have one, Catherine stated flatly. You made her smile. None of her therapists have managed that. I don't want a therapist. Her voice faltered for a second. I want my daughter to be happy. The terms are non-negotiable. Your first session is this afternoon. She turned and walked away before he could protest further, leaving him standing in the grand foyer, his dust cloth still in hand, his world once again turned upside down. That afternoon at 3 p.m., Leo nervously entered the therapy suite. The room had been transformed. A comfortable armchair had been brought in, and the high-end speaker was queued up with a playlist of classical piano music. Lily was waiting in her wheelchair, her eyes bright with anticipation. Dr. Thorne and Nurse Amelia were gone. For the first time, it was just the two of them. Well, Leo said softly, pulling the armchair closer, your mom is a very persuasive woman. Lily's lips twitched into a smile. He didn't know where to start. He wasn't a performer or an entertainer, so he just did what felt natural. He started talking. He told her about Maya. He pulled out his worn leather wallet and showed her a school picture of a smiling, gap-toothed little girl. This is my Maya, he said, his voice thick with pride. She's a little artist. Our apartment walls are covered in her masterpieces, mostly of our cat, Patches, who is very fat and very lazy. He talked for the whole hour. He told her about his wife, Elena, and how she taught him to dance. He told her about his old workshop, the smell of sawdust and wood varnish, and the joy of creating something beautiful with his own hands. He didn't condescend to her or simplify his language. He spoke to her as an equal, a confidant. He filled the silent room with his stories, with the texture of a life lived outside the sterile walls of the mansion. Lily listened enraptured. She didn't make a sound, but her eyes never left his face. She was drinking in his words, his warmth, his simple, unaffected humanity. When the hour was up, Leo stood to leave. I'll see you tomorrow, Lily, he said. As he reached the door, he heard a small sound behind him. He turned. Lily was looking at him, her expression one of intense effort. Her mouth worked, and a sound emerged, quiet and raspy, but clear as a bell. Leo. It was the first word anyone, including Catherine, had heard her speak in over a year. Leo's heart swelled. He grinned at her. That's me. I'll see you tomorrow. Upstairs, Catherine watched on the monitor, her hand covering her mouth as silent tears streamed down her face. She had been listening via the room's hidden microphone. She had heard his stories. She had heard her daughter's voice. And in that moment, she knew that this man, this janitor who her company had inadvertently wronged, was not a threat to her family. He was, in fact, their only hope. The wall of ice around her heart didn't just thaw, it shattered. Lily's single word echoed through the Vanderbilt mansion with the force of a seismic event. The change in her was immediate and profound. It was as if Leo's daily visits had unlocked a door inside her that had been bolted shut. She began attempting more words, slowly and with great effort, but they were there. More when she wanted the music to continue. Maya, when Leo told a story about his daughter. Catherine, witnessing this miracle, found herself in an impossible position. Her gratitude towards Leo was immense, but it was poisoned by the guilt of her secret. Every time he made Lily laugh, every time her therapist reported a small breakthrough, Catherine felt the weight of the investigator's report pressed down on her. He was healing her family while completely unaware of how her family's empire had contributed to breaking his. She knew she had to tell him. The lie of omission was becoming a chasm between them, corrupting the fragile, authentic connection he was building with her daughter. She chose a Friday evening after his session with Lily. She asked him to meet her in the one room she had avoided for 3 years. The music room. Leo entered cautiously. The room was dominated by a magnificent Steinway grand piano, its polished black surface reflecting the dim light. A thin layer of dust covered everything, a testament to suspended grief. Catherine was standing by the window, her back to him. She was not wearing her usual power suit, but a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. She looked smaller, more vulnerable. "Thank you for meeting me, Leo," she said without turning around. "Of course, Mrs. Vanderbilt. Is everything all right with Lily?" "Lily is better than all right," she said, finally facing him. Her eyes were shadowed with an emotion he couldn't read. "She's waking up, and it's because of you. I can never repay you for that." "There's nothing to repay," Leo said sincerely. "Being with her, it's a gift." Catherine's composure broke. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "That's where you're wrong," she whispered. "There is a debt, and it's mine to pay." She took a deep breath and began to speak. She told him everything. She told him about the private investigator, her initial suspicion, and the shocking discovery. She told him about cybernetic solutions, Omnilectrics, and the faulty PowerGuard Pro Series 7 surge protector. She spared no detail, laying the corporate chain of liability bare. "My company, the empire my husband built and that I now run, we were responsible," she finished, her voice choked with shame. "The fire that took your workshop, that ultimately took your wife, the fault began with us. I am so sorry, Leo." Leo stood in the stunned silence, the world rearranging itself around him. For years, he had accepted the fire as a cruel twist of fate, a random act of misfortune. To learn now that it had a source, a name, a corporate entity behind it, and that this entity was owned by the very woman whose child he was helping, it was too much to process. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through him. It was an old, familiar rage he hadn't felt since the days after Elena's death. He wanted to yell, to scream, to smash something. He looked at this billionaire, with her tear-streaked face and her cashmere sweater, and saw the face of the faceless corporation that had ruined him. "You investigated me?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "Yes, I was wrong to do it, but I had to protect my daughter. And you've known this? All this time you've been paying me to be some kind of court jester for Lily, you knew?" "I've known for 2 weeks," she confessed. "I didn't know how to tell you." "So what is this?" Leo asked, his voice rising, gesturing around the opulent room. "Is this charity? Guilt money? You pay the man you wronged to play with your kids so you can sleep better at night?" "No," Catherine insisted, taking a step toward him. "No, it started as that maybe. I don't know, but it's not that now. I see what you do for Lily. I see the light you've brought back into this house. This is about more than money." "Everything is about money for people like you," Leo shot back, the raw pain of years of struggle pouring out of him. "You break something, you buy a new one. You ruin a life, you write a check. Do you have any idea what it's like? To have to choose between buying your daughter new shoes or fixing the car? To lie awake at night, terrified that one bad cold will land you in a hospital with a bill you can't pay? That's the world your faulty product left me in." His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. She flinched, but she didn't look away. She stood there and took it, absorbing his righteous anger because she knew he had earned the right to it. The climax of their confrontation was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. The door to the music room creaked open. In the doorway, standing with the help of a four-pronged cane and flanked by a shocked Nurse Amelia, was Lily. Her legs were braced and shaky, but she was upright. She had been taking tentative steps with her therapist, but she had never attempted to walk this far on her own. Drawn by the sound of raised voices, a novelty in her silent home, she had made her way from her room. Leo," she said, her voice trembling with effort and fear. Mama?" The anger vanished from the room, replaced by a stunned silence. Both Leo and Catherine stared at the little girl standing in the doorway. It was the first time she had ever called Catherine Mama. Lily looked from Leo's furious face to her mother's tearful one. She saw the chasm that had opened between the two most important people in her new, reawakening world. Her face crumpled, and she began to cry, her shaky legs threatening to give out. In an instant, they were no longer adversaries. They were two parents, united by the sight of a distressed child. They both rushed to her side. Leo reached her first, instinctively kneeling and steadying her, with a gentle hand on her arm. Catherine was a second behind, her hand resting on Lily's other shoulder. They were a tableau of a broken, complicated, and utterly intertwined family. Kneeling on the dusty floor of the silent music room, with their daughter standing between them, the full weight of their shared past and their uncertain future settled upon them. The argument was over. The only thing that mattered now was the little girl they both loved. The moment in the music room was a painful, necessary crucible. It burned away the last of the deceptions and pretenses, leaving behind a raw and honest foundation. In the days that followed, an unspoken truce settled between Leo and Catherine. The anger and guilt hadn't vanished, but they were overshadowed by their shared commitment to Lily. Catherine, true to her nature, immediately tried to solve the problem with action and resources. She called a meeting with Leo, not in a formal office, but at the small table in the sunlit breakfast nook. Two of her top corporate lawyers were present, much to Leo's discomfort. "Leo," she began formally, "I have instructed my legal team to prepare a settlement. It is a multi-million-dollar trust, which will cover retroactive damages for your business, punitive damages for your wife's passing, and provide for Maya's future education and your own retirement. It is the least Vanderbilt Innovations can do." The lawyers slid a thick portfolio across the table. Leo didn't even look at it. He looked at Catherine, and for the first time, he saw not the CEO, but the grieving mother who was trying to fix an unfixable wrong the only way she knew how. "I don't want it," he said quietly. The lawyers exchanged incredulous looks. Catherine was taken aback. "I don't understand. This is what you're owed. It's justice." "No," Leo said, shaking his head. "Justice would be having my wife back. It would be my daughter having her mother. You can't write a check for that, Catherine." He used her first name for the first time, and it hung in the air between them, signaling a profound shift in their dynamic. "This money, it feels like an ending," he continued, struggling to find the words. "It feels like you paying me to go away. And if I go, what happens to Lily?" The question hit Catherine with the force of a physical blow. He was right. The settlement was an attempt to wipe the slate clean, to close a painful chapter. But doing so would mean severing the one connection that was bringing her daughter back to life. "Then what do you want?" she asked, her voice small. "Tell me what to do." "I don't want to be your janitor anymore," he said. "And I don't want to be your charity case. I want to build things again." An idea, one that had been germinating in the back of his mind, came to the forefront. "You have all this money, all these resources. You start foundations, you fund research. What if we started something new?" He leaned forward, his passion igniting. "A place, a workshop. We could call it the Elena and Richard Workshop. We could design and build therapeutic toys and custom equipment for kids like Lily. Things made with care, by hand. Not cold medical devices, but beautiful, joyful things made of wood and bright colors. We could employ other artisans who've had bad breaks. We could make a real difference, not just with a check, but with our hands. You could fund it. I could run it." Catherine stared at him, her mind reeling. It was audacious, brilliant, and deeply personal. It wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. It was a way to honor their respective spouses, not by dwelling on the tragedy of their deaths, but by creating a legacy of joy and healing in their names. It was a way for him to reclaim his identity as a craftsman and for her to use her power for something tangible and good. Most importantly, it was a way to keep him in their lives, not as an employee or a project, but as a partner. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said, the word filled with more hope than she had felt in years. "Yes, Leo, let's do that." She dismissed the stunned lawyers with a wave of her hand. 1 year later, the grand opening of the Vanderbilt Martinez Foundation for Therapeutic Creation was a major city event. The state-of-the-art workshop was bright and airy, filled with the scent of fresh-cut pine and the hum of creation. Leo, dressed not in a janitor's uniform but in a handsome blazer and jeans, stood proudly beside Catherine as they cut the ribbon. He looked like his old self again, a man with purpose and dignity. In the crowd, two little girls were playing together. One was Maya, her pigtails flying as she laughed, her hands covered in paint from the children's activity corner. The other was Lily. She was out of her wheelchair, walking confidently with the help of two beautifully carved, brightly painted wooden canes. The workshop's first official creation, designed and built by Leo himself. She was chattering away to Maya, her speech still slow, but growing clearer every day. As the cameras flashed, Catherine looked away from the press and over at Leo. He caught her eye and gave her a warm, grateful smile. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no whirlwind romance. Their lives were still complicated, their shared history still shadowed by loss. But they were a new kind of family, forged in tragedy and rebuilt through an unlikely dance. They were two broken people who, by helping a little girl find her voice, had managed to find their own paths to healing. In the busy, vibrant workshop, surrounded by the promise of all the good they would do, the heavy, suffocating silence was finally, truly gone. We've just walked a long, emotional road with Leo, Catherine, and little Lily. Their story reminds us that beneath the labels we wear, janitor, CEO, disabled, we are all just human beings, searching for connection and healing. It shows us that the deepest wounds can sometimes lead to the most beautiful transformations, and that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of shared joy, like a simple, unexpected dance on a marble floor. The greatest acts of kindness often come from the most humble hearts, and they have the power to change everything. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the light that can be found in the most unexpected places, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the incredible strength of the human spirit. Your engagement helps us continue to create and share content that truly matters. Thank you for listening.